Okay, great. I'd like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40, First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. With me today are Diane Knight and Kevin Stephenson. My name is Harvey Diamond. I'll be chairing this meeting. The City Assessment Department is represented by Justin Mikulik, and our administrator is Zachary Moen. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note that you are placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along on the City of Winnipeg's Board of Revision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once your hearing has concluded, you can leave the meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rules in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision are requested to be described in each application. We will be limiting the discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matters must be first sworn in. Be advised the comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered as evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes a decision based on the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that would be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note the board's decision with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or to classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to an application for exemption from taxation, and should you wish to appeal. Information on do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will give an opportunity to summarize if we wish to do so. Once all the evidence upon the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The person will repeat for each item on the docket today, and the session will close after the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You receive the board's decision by written mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of a public record. And we'll be hearing items 1 to 3 and 3 to 8 on the docket today. And Mr. Moen, please affirm the assessors and the first applicant's testimony at this time.
Of course, Mr. Chair. Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Justin Mikulik.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Person Horsborough.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay, our first item is the property at 28 Cromwell. And Mr. Mikulik, I know that you are maintaining non-cooperation. You can continue or start with that, please.
Okay, so we have file number 24-768, roll number 0609126300, and yes, we are seeking the non-cooperation on the basis that there has been no income and expense mailers filed for the last 3 years, and I've supplied on page 14, starting at page 14, 15, and 16, just to show we did send out the mailer to the address on file at 4 St. Mary's Road, which is the owner's address, and we have a signature and the item number LP on page 15, the item number LP 726454586CA matches up on page 14 with that item number LP 726454586CA. So from that regard, we are seeking the non-compliance. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Horsborough, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, any questions?
No questions, no.
And Mr. Stefan, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
And I don't either, so we're gonna have to go into camera to determine whether we're gonna grant the assessor's request. Thank you. I can indicate we are granting the assessor's request, and we've made a finding of non-cooperation. So, Mr. Horsborough, that means that the onus shifts to the applicant, which is you, and you'll have to go first. And if, in fact, you are successful in getting a reduction of the assessment, it won't kick in until the 1926 assessment year. That's the penalty. You can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the property we're discussing today is 25 Cromwell Street with an assessed value of $826,000. If the board will follow me to page 3 of my disclosure, the subject property is an 11-suite multi-residential property that has been assessed using the income approach to value. The property was constructed in 1955 and has been assessed at $826,000. MNP has valued the subject property, and we have determined that the fair market value amounts to $687,000. On pages 4 and 5 of the disclosure, we have the City of Winnipeg assessment and taxation income workup for the subject property. And on page 6, we have MNP's valuation of the subject property. The main issues being disputed are the assessed income and assessed expenses for the subject property. The property has been assessed with potential income amounting to $86,944. MNP has analyzed the financials for the subject property, and we have determined that the correct potential income would amount to $68,540. And the actual expense allowance is slightly lower than what's been assessed and amounts to $33,793. The assessed capitalization rate of 4.8% is not in dispute. Moving on to page 8 of the disclosure, we have the assessment map and aerial photograph of the subject property. And on page 9, we have some exterior photographs of the property. If the board will follow me onto page 10, the subject property sold in 2019 for $675,000. Moving on to page 11, the subject property has been assessed with potential income that it cannot be achieving due to rent control legislation. After I prepared this report, I was made aware that one of the units has been renovated out of 11. So we have one unit that's been renovated. Whether or not that one of the 11 units was renovated to an extent that the residential tenancies branch allowed a rental increase, I'm not certain, but I can confirm that the vast majority of the units have remained unrenovated, and the changes to the gross potential income that this property is producing is somewhat limited due to the rent control limits that have been in place over the last number of years. When the subject property was purchased in 2019, it was generating annual rents of $65,880. In 2020 and 2021, the rental increase was limited to 2.4% and then 1.6%, and was frozen in 2022 and 2023. So the total income that the property is generating, looking at what was submitted to the City of Winnipeg in 2019 when the property was sold, there's just no way for the income to have risen or the rents to have risen to an extent that the property could be achieving the annual rent of $86,944. It's not possible due to rent control legislation. The subject property has undergone some renovations. As I said, one of the units has been renovated. However, the rest of the work that's been done to this property since it was purchased are maintenance items, including updated wiring and a new furnace. If the board will follow me now to page 12 of the disclosure, the subject neighborhood has a number of issues that have grown significantly worse in recent years. Between the reference period of April 1st, 2021 and the current reference period of April 1st, 2023, crime has gotten significantly worse in the subject neighborhood. As outlined in this table on page 12, you can see that property crime in particular for this neighborhood has skyrocketed between the last reference period and the current reference period. And that the effect of crime in the neighborhood is that it makes the property less attractive to potential tenants, as well it makes the property less attractive to potential buyers, as higher crime rates lead to higher insurance rates, higher expenditures on repairs and maintenance, higher security costs, and overall, as an income producing asset, the property becomes less attractive to potential buyers. Moving on to page 14, the neighborhood also has struggled in the past two years with encampments rising up just near the subject property. This data is from End Homelessness Winnipeg, and the map on page 14 shows where the encampments are in relation to the subject property. Again, while this is a sad reality that is widespread in Winnipeg, in particular, it certainly makes the property less attractive to tenants and ultimately limits the demand for the property and affects the kind of rents that they can achieve. On page 13, I have again the valuation summary. MNP has determined that the correct market value for the subject property amounts to $687,000. And respectfully, I would ask the board to revise the assessed value to the correct and fair market value. And with that, I would welcome any questions. Thank you very much.
Mr. McCulloch, any questions?
Yeah, just in regards to the income, did you compare market rents at all? CMHC market rents in your analysis?
I looked at market rents. However, the property itself being a 1955 build with rent control legislation in place, I placed my weight on the actual financial performance of the property as opposed to what the market rents would be.
And do you have access to any of the current financial performance of the property for 2022?
I do not.
Did you inspect the property at all?
I have not inspected the property.
And are you aware of any vacancy issues or what their vacancy is at the moment, or?
As far as I'm aware, the property is fully leased.
Okay. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stephenson, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
Just in regards to the encampments, was this in 2023, 2021? What's the date of this picture?
Let me double check. I believe this is as of 2023. This would have been spring 2023.
Okay, and are you aware that encampments are all over the city, not just in this end?
Yes, I'm aware. The reason I put it is just the proximity to the apartment block itself and the number of them.
Okay, the rest of my questions were asked and answered already.
Hey, Mr. Horsborough, so my question is, you're going back to 2018 when the property was purchased and what was disclosed by the vendor at that time. Why aren't you using today's rents and today's costs when you do your analysis? You're basically going back to 2018 and then saying because of rent controls, this is what it would be today. But how can you say that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the owner did not provide us with current financials for the property. So this is kind of the best information we have.
Yeah, but the owner is seeking a decrease in his assessment, and don't you think if he's doing that, he should show us? In fact, he's saying this is not performing because to the extent of the assessment, isn't it incumbent upon him then to show us what is happening today? Because what you're doing is you're basically saying because of rent controls, because of what was disclosed in 2018, this is what I saying 5 years later this property would be doing. And I even note that one property is one of the suites you're saying has been updated, but you haven't done an inspection, so you can't really say if all the suites don't look like that now.
Yes, ideally we would have all the current financials. I would prefer to be here and speak into the current financials, but I don't have those available to me.
Okay, thank you. That's my questions. Mr. Mikulik, you can proceed with your evidence.
Okay. So again, we read in the file number already. So we have the assessed value here for 2025 at 826,000, being a two-story 1955 build with 11 suites. So if you do look at the location, we discussed located by the Santa Lucia, right behind it on St. Mary's. So it is still a good location for rentals, as you could, as Mr. Horsberg talked about. The property is fully leased to his knowledge. And when you look at our income workup here, we have 11 one-bedrooms at 658.67 per unit, which works out to the 86,944. With subtracting vacancy, we have an effective gross income of 84,683, a 53.18% expense ratio for a net operating income of 39,649, using a cap rate of 4.8% to get the 826,000. Now, we know that the owner didn't provide the information on the rents for the past 3 years since the sale. So when we look at here and we compare it to other properties in the area, you can see where the average monthly rent per unit falls in line. We're at 658.67. We have ones that vary from 843, 856, 777, and 681. So we are already with this property on the lower end of the spectrum relative to current rents up to 2022. So really, when we just see that and no submission from the current owner, we would tend to defer to our model income. And you could see here, cap rate's not disputed, so I won't touch on that. But on page 8, I found a Kijiji ad that does show the new renovated one-bed, one-bath apartment. I'm assuming this might be the one unit that we had been speaking of. And you could see just what it includes. So includes heat and water. And description, you can see beautiful new renovated one-bedroom rental in Norwood, small quaint building close to Forks, many shops, new plank laminate flooring, new fresh paint, new kitchen with stainless steel appliances, quartz countertops, bathroom is new with tub and shower. So this seems like it's a situation where they're going to be renovating on turnover. I think that's usually reasonable in these cases when we see people take over these type of buildings. But I did include the 2018 income statement, and it did show a net operating income 35,050. So the model's at 39,649 for income. And we haven't had any submission. The rents don't seem unreasonable from the model side of things. So we feel that it's acceptable to keep this value at 826,000. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hertzberg, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Stephenson, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
One thing I note, Mr. Mikulik, is that although your comparisons that you're showing on page 4, this suite is smaller than any of your comparables. Would you agree?
Yep,
And so that would probably dictate to a lower rental.
it could. Yep.
Okay. Well, I won't ask you any questions about the cap rate since it's not a question that's been brought up. So that's my questions then. Thank you. We can proceed to our next property then. And that is the property at 1145 Dakota Street. And Mr. Mikulik, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Okay. Okay, we have file number 24-525, roll number 080056333400, 1145 Dakota Street, roll year 2025, assessed value 27,691,000, classification 20, liability is taxable. We have a one building, 4 stories, built in 2006 with 170 suites and 107 parking. You could see where it's located on page 2. I've included, it's in the St. Vital neighborhood right across from the Dakota Community / Jonathan Taves Community Center, if you're just sort of looking at a picture of the neighborhood to draw for yourself. So a pretty good location wise in a good neighborhood, close to a lot of amenities. Now, we have assessed here 170 total units, and I just want to say, if you go to my page 13, so it is a how, like it is a kind of a assisted type living facility where included in your rent is like dining, housekeeping, activities. So the way we've approached this is by just using market rents. We don't factor in all the extra income and expenses they receive. But however, if we did, the income would be significantly higher, as you'll see when I touch on my presentation further. But for this, we have 170 units, 1 bachelor, 97 1 bed, 72 2 bed, for an average monthly rent of $1,232.37. We have a gross potential rent then of $2,514,000. Less vacancy, you get an effective gross income of $2,423,530 with a 42.30% expense ratio and a net operating income of $1,398,377 using a capitalization rate of 5.05% to get the market value of $27,691,000. When we go to page 4, so there is some rent comps that I did provide, and these are other market apartments. So you could see the range here, going from $1,280 to $1,494. These would be your typical apartments that would be, say, a for-profit entity. And again, this is another for-profit entity. However, they just offer a lot of services in regards to this, and people really pay a premium for that. When we see here how this lines up with CMHC, just doing a weighted average. So what I had done is just taking private apartment average rents, and then I did the private apartment average rents based on year of construction, based on zone, which is zone 10 St. Vital, and based on the size of the structure. And so on page 6, when we weight this against all those attributes, you could see the percentage of market rents we come into at is 95.88% of market, so which is perfectly acceptable again for this type of property. When we talk about cap rate here on page 7, you could see we've provided in the multifamily box, you could see the varieties of cap rates from the different broker market reports, where the city falls in line right across the board between the 20th and 80th percentile, between 4.75 and 5.45%, and then the other market reports based on Colliers, CBRE, Cushman, Wakefield, being, say, Colliers is between 5 and 6, CBRE's 4.75 to 5.25, Cushman's 4.75 to 5.50 for high rise. Low rise, which this would fall into, would be, say, 5 to 6 on Colliers, 5 to 5.75 in Cushman. And again, this would be a low rise A for CBRE, so between 4.50 and 5.25. So, and then on page 8, we have our cap rate evidence we provide. These are sales that we've reviewed and stabilized their expenses and their net operating income to come up with a cap rate based on the sale price. And so the way we do it is we take the income reported the year before the sale and we stabilize the expenses. And so that's based on the income that they have reported to us. And so we use this as just a verification to sort of say, like, you know, if the model cap's coming out at 5.05, like, is that a reasonable range of value based on these sales? I would say it is. And even when it checks out against the other broker reports, I would say that we are reasonable in that end. And so when we go to page 10, I just provided some pictures from their website. So you could see a picture of one of the units they had on there. You see what they look like. Some of the suites are obviously adapted to more of the accessible side of things, which is perfectly acceptable for the type of clients that they have. I'm fairly certain there is a waiting list to get in these places, so demand is pretty high. You could see the courtyard here on page 11, very well maintained facility. And then just on page 13, I had provided just an excerpt of what it is. So located in the heart of St. Vital, they sit right across from Dakota Community Club, a public library just down the street from St. Vital Center. Dakota House offers residents beautifully landscaped walkways, a rear courtyard complete with gardens and comfortable sitting areas. So each suite features individually controlled heat and air conditioning, ample storage. Kitchens are equipped with a full stove and fridge, balcony, and then included in your rent, it just says, you know, dining. So you get brunch and delicious 3-course dinner served daily. Weekly light housekeeping is provided, linen service, as well as daily garbage collection. Activities, presentations, entertainment are planned on a monthly basis. So we provide a guest suite for out-of-town guests, as well as private dining for gatherings, family and friends. Laundry facilities, no extra charge, and all residents feature a full-service hair salon. So it really does give you a lot of features that these tenants pay for. And I think on page 15, when you see the rents, you could see the rental revenue on page 15 is coming in at $6,077,000, where our model's coming in at $2,514,000. And again, that's because we assess these at market. But if you wanted to factor in everything here, their gross profits $5,514,798, and just if you subtract adjust for interest and depreciation, their net operating income is $2,371,000. So the model, I think, is about $1 million lower than that, and using just market parameters. So you could see the amount of profit involved with these type of properties. Now, I know there's some broker market reports that do say that these type of facilities would sell at, say, a 6.5% to 7.5% cap rate. And I mean, that's all in fair, but that's encapsulating all of their income, right? So that would be capping 2,371,000. And I mean, if you did that at 7%, you're still going to get a value that's going to be well above what we have here at the 27,691,000. So I think our approach to the overall value on this is fair, and I think the cap rate based on the information that's been provided today has been fair and reasonable, given that it's a newer build, it's in a good area, and I think we've supported it well to maintain the value at what it is. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hertzberg, any questions?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Horsburgh, I think you're currently muted.
Thank you, Zachary. Sorry for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple of questions for the assessor. Just looking at page 4 of the disclosure, I wanted to confirm that the 3 rent comparables, these are from apartments, not assisted living facilities, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. And moving on to capitalization rates on page 7, you said that you were aware that third parties such as Cushman & Wakefield, Collier, CBRE, that they track capitalization rates for assisted living facilities. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Is there any reason why they're excluded from this table?
No, there is no reason. Just we assess it as a market apartment, so we feel that it's just relevant to include the cap rates on what we are basing it on.
Thank you. And moving on to page 8 of your disclosure, cap rate evidence. Are any of these sales assisted living or seniors facilities?
They are not.
Are any of them close in terms of their area, like their location to the subject?
Outside of, there are a few in St. Vital. There's 203 Bertrand, 32 Arden. I think those would be probably maybe the closest 700 St. Mary's, but that's those would be St. Vital market region. But
And would you agree there are all substantially smaller than the subject property in terms of their dwelling units?
outside of 2390 McPhillips, yes, they are smaller.
And so, just in terms of the applied cap rate, more weight is given to the sales comparables or the third party market reports?
I would say more weight is, I would say they're placed more on the actual sales that we were to derive. I mean, if we were to look at a sale at 2390 McPhillips at 4.7, again, we assess this based on market parameters, right? So if we look at a 2006 build with 170 units, and we're at a 5.05, I don't see how we're out of line if we're basing it on those parameters. So.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Stephenson, do you have any questions?
So the cap rate's model generated, but based on what? Again, are they comparing it to like regular apartments?
That's right.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mack, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Yeah, and I don't have any questions either. So, Mr. Horsburgh, you can present your evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I begin, I also want to let the board know that I have submitted rebuttal for this property.
Okay, well, we can look at the rebuttal after you go through your evidence and determine whether we're here or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the property we're discussing is 1145 Dakota Street with an assessed value of $27,691,000. If the board will follow me to page 4 of my disclosure, MNP has valued the subject property. Our valuation is not far off from what it's been assessed at. We have determined that the fair market value for the subject property amounts to $25,425,000. On pages 5 and 6, we have the assessment and taxation department's income valuation for the subject property. And on page 7, we have MNP's income valuation of the subject property. The main point of, or really the only point of contention here has to do with the capitalization rate. The city has applied a cap rate of 5.05%, whereas MNP feels that a capitalization rate of 5.5% is more representative for the subject property. Moving on to page 9, we have the assessment map showing the property's location. And on pages 10 and 11, we have an aerial photograph and exterior photographs of the subject property. Excuse me. If the board will follow me to page 12 of the disclosure, that's where we have our cap rate argument here. So it is our opinion that the capitalization rate that's been applied is not reflective of the market conditions as of April 1st, 2023. The graph on page 12 shows the rapid and significant increase of interest rates between the last assessment reference date of April 1st, 2021 and the current reference date of April 1st, 2023. So in an environment where interest rates were increasing, the assessment and taxation department has been decreasing cap rates throughout the city. Now, moving on to page 13, there are a number of ways to determine what an appropriate capitalization rate is for any given property. The assessor has pointed to market sales of apartment buildings. The subject property is an assisted living facility. It's a completely different asset type, which is going to attract different investors. Carries a lot more risk than an apartment building. You think back during COVID, the deaths that happened in assisted living facilities, the kind of liability that a property like that carries versus a typical apartment building. They're two fundamentally different asset classes. So how do you determine what an appropriate capitalization rate is for this type of property? The city, regardless of the fact that they've treated the property as an apartment building, it's not an apartment building. They can treat it as such, but that doesn't change the fundamental reality that this property is an assisted living facility, and it's a completely different asset type that's going to attract different investors, a whole different group of investors. So they've decided that the best way to value these properties is to treat it as an apartment block and to apply a capitalization rate that would work for your typical apartment block. This isn't an apartment building. So you can look at number one, direct market observation. Ideally, that's the best way to derive a cap rate, to have a similar building, to have several recent sales of similar buildings and derive the cap rate that way. For an 170 unit assisted living facility, there aren't a bunch of recent sales. Sales are few and far between. It's not going to, you're not going to be able to derive a cap rate based on sales for this type of property. So you can look at the second way that you can derive a capitalization rate. You can look at the mortgage equity method. So you can look at what a risk-free rate of return is and try to determine what an appropriate additional return would be to reflect the risk that you're taking on. With the mortgage equity method, a fair bit of that capitalization rate determination is going to be left to an appraiser's judgment, to anyone's judgment as to what the extra return is going to be over the risk-free rate of return. The third method for driving a capitalization rate is to look at other sources. So M&P has ultimately looked at other sources, third parties, independent third parties. We've looked at how they've determined their capitalization rates. They survey owners of these types of buildings. They look at sales of this type of building. We feel that their information as it pertains to capitalization rates is going to be the most reflective of the market. We did consider the mortgage equity method in determining a capitalization rate for the subject property, although ultimately there's too much left to judgment in terms of determining what kind of extra rate of return you're going to get over that risk-free rate of return. But ultimately, you are going to have to expect a greater return for taking on greater risk. So the capitalization rate is going to be higher than your risk-free rate of return. So looking at CBRE and Cushman & Wakefield, both third-party commercial real estate firms, they keep track of capitalization rates for this subject property type. If you look at the table I've included on page 14, the second table on page 14, under the heading Seniors Living Facilities, you can see what the capitalization rates were for this asset type in Q1 2021, corresponding to the previous reference date, and Q1 2023, which is the current reference date. And what you'll notice is that the capitalization rates increased during this time, and that corresponds with a market where interest rates are increasing. So in order to keep up with the increased cost of borrowing, you're going to need increased return to compensate. So in a market where interest rates are increasing and capitalization rates are increasing, the city is using below market cap rates that there's no support for in assessing the property. Now, moving on to page 15, I've included a table from Cushman & Wakefield showing capitalization rates for seniors housing throughout Canada. In Winnipeg, capitalization rates range from 6.5% to 7.25%. So really there's the support for cap rate. We're asking for a 5.5% cap rate for this property. That's lower than what the market says. And we aren't pushing for a 6.5% cap rate because we do acknowledge that this property is being valued as an apartment building. However, it's not an apartment building. And anyone who's going to be purchasing it is going to be taking on risk that they aren't taking on if they're buying a typical apartment block. So we feel that an increase in capitalization rate is appropriate for the subject property because ultimately it's a fundamentally different asset. And with that, I would conclude my presentation and welcome any questions.
Thank you. Mr. McCulloch, any questions?
Yeah, just from when you had spoken of an investor perspective on purchasing this property, they would be buying it based on their true actual reported income of what I had shown at 2.3 million. Would you agree to that?
Right. We aren't here debating the business value. We're talking about the real estate value. So I'm not going to speak to the business financials.
Okay, so would you agree though that the cap rates of 6.5 and 7.25% that's listed here on page 15, those purchases would include actual income that the property is receiving? Would you agree?
I would agree that those capitalization rates are derived that way, yes.
Okay. So would you agree if we use the reported income based on these type of cap rates, the value would be significantly higher than what the assessment is today?
I haven't ran those numbers.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, any questions?
So you're comparing these. Okay, so in this building, there's really no rental availability, correct?
My understanding is that vacancy is mostly frictional. I don't know that they have a lot of vacancy. I don't believe so.
Because there's a huge waiting list, correct?
I'm not aware of the waiting list. I know the assessor mentioned a waiting list,
Mhm.
but in general, I think there is strong demand for these properties.
So if you're looking at an apartment building has less waiting list, less people looking for it, more time open than this would have, correct?
In general, I tend to think that assisted living facilities have less vacancy, yes, than your typical apartment building.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mr. Tibbetts, any questions?
So you agree that the rent, vacancy, and expenses, you're not contesting them, and they were based on apartment comparisons?
The rent generally, like in speaking to the owners of properties like this, generally they consider about half of the rent that tenants are paying is really for the apartment unit itself, and kind of half of it is usually more for the amenities, the services. So when looking at the financials and what the city's assessed for income and expenses, it falls within a range that fits with what I've heard from the owners and managers of this type of property.
Did you calculate if that comes in at the NOI that you're agreeing to, or
That I didn't look into.
no? Okay, thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, and I have no questions at this point, so thank you. So we'll then move on to item number 4, which is,
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
yes.
I have some.
Oh, you have a rebuttal. I'm sorry. Please tell us what's your rebuttal. It's not new evidence, I hope.
It's not new evidence, no. I'm
Okay.
rebutting the assessor's evidence.
If it's only rebuttal, we'll allow it then, and then we'll have to have it sent to us and load our SharePoints.
Yes, it should be active right now on the SharePoint, Mr. Chair. Mr. Assessor, you received the rebuttal, correct?
That's right, I got it.
Okay, perfect,
It's there. I have it.
perfect.
I don't see it yet, so just give me a second.
If we re-download our SharePoint, we should have it now, Mr. Moen?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
I was able to grab it off SharePoint after refreshing.
I still don't have it. I still don't have it.
Should be, it's item 3.
Item 3.
Named as item 3, yeah.
Uploaded 3 minutes, or I guess
It
more.
says introduction and adjournment, item 3.
You know what, Mr. Chair, I think I've accomplished what I set out to with the rebuttal in my presentation. So if it makes things a bit easier, we can just skip the rebuttal.
Okay, that makes things a little bit easier since we're
I still don't have it. Yeah.
So thank you for that. So then we'll move on then at this point to item number 4, which is the property at 429 Westwood Drive. And Mr. McCulloch, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Yes. Okay. So we have file number 24-434, roll number 075-500-45500, 429 Westwood Drive, roll year 2025, assessed value 73,723,000, classification 20, liability is taxable. So I just want to give an update here. I had reached out to Mr. Horsberg about a recommendation this morning. When I had reviewed his evidence, I had agreed to accept his net operating income of $3,737,833, and I had offered a recommendation of $71,881,000. Would that be accepted?
Mr. Hirschberg?
Thank you, Mr. McCulloch. If the board will allow me just a moment, the assessor and I discussed this offer just at 8 o'clock this morning. So I emailed my client, but if you'll allow me just a moment, I'll see if I've heard back.
Do you want to take a 5-minute adjournment at this time then or can you?
That would be it. I can see I haven't heard back, so I don't think we need a 5-minute recess or adjournment.
Okay, so you're not, so then without word from your client, you're not.
So we're in agreement as it pertains to the net operating income, but however, overall, I'm not able to accept the recommendation without receiving concurrence from my client.
No,
Okay.
fair enough.
Okay, Mr. Mr. How much, I didn't get the amount, 71 million.
Yeah, so the new value would be revised to 71,881,000.
Okay. And that's based on utilizing the NOI of the applicant and continue on with the model, I guess, cap rate.
Yeah, so the cap rate in this instance would be what we have at 5.2%, to get that figure of 71,881,000.
Okay.
And so yeah, so for the purpose of this sake, since I did agree to the income, I will just proceed with the discussion overall about where we are on cap rate, if that's okay.
And that's satisfactory for sure.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so continuing on, we have a property here. So it's two high rises that are located on 429 Westwood Drive. So with the one building is a 1983 build, and what the other building is a 2012 build. So in total, we have 368 suites. We have indoor parking and outdoor parking as well. If you could see the location here on page 2, it's located just south of Portage Avenue on Westwood Drive. If you're kind of looking to draw maybe a frame of reference for the area, you would be looking at kind of where the Grace Hospital would be, maybe about a 5-minute drive from there. So we're in the St. James neighborhood again, another pretty good area, close to a lot of amenities, public transportation, etc. Now, since we have agreed the income's fine, when we look at cap rate overall, again, I'll just lead to page 5. So again, with the high rises, we're at 4.75 to 5.45 when we look at the 20th to 80th percentile with our assessment modeling, and we're at 5.2 for this property. Now, you could see where the other ones would fall in on a high rise, Collier's being 5 to 6, CBRE being 4.75 to 5.25, and Cushman Wakefield being 4.75 to 5.50. So we're at a 5.2 here for a property that has a new builder, well, a newer build on it, being 2012. And a 1983 build that has had updating throughout some of the suites. Again, it's one of these situations where these buildings they renovate on turnover. They're pretty well run for the most part that way, owned by large entities that have multiple real estate investments in their portfolio. Now, again, when we look at capitalization rate evidence, 2390 McPhillips, which is a new build in 2015, is capping out for us at a 4.71%. We feel that, we're here at 5.20 for a high rise. It fits in with what the broker market reports are suggesting. It fits in being almost a half point higher than 2390 McPhillips. When you do look at their income and expenses that I had provided, you could just see that it is solid income that you are generating, right? So a purchaser would be aware of that, and I think they would be more than happy if they could get a 5.2% cap rate on a three million plus dollar income stream. These type of properties run very well over the long term. They're anchors in investment portfolios. So really, when we look at the 5.2% cap rate, given the market evidence that we've supplied, I think we are acceptable here on my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horsburgh, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions for the assessor. Just on page 6, the cap rate evidence, you were speaking to 2390 McPhillips Street. So that would you say you gave the most weight to that sale and determination of the cap rate for the subject property?
I would say I gave the most weight in terms of gauging that our capitalization rate is acceptable. Yeah, I mean, I could make a case that it could be lower potentially, but I don't think that really needs to be necessary in this form.
And did you look at any sales of apartment buildings with more than 100 units, something that's closer to the same size as the subject property?
I did not have access to some of those as they don't transact through land titles. However, they are share transfers, but sometimes share transfers in this form again have somewhat been debated when we bring them forward. So I tend to not want to include those, but it was a consideration for sure.
Okay, but no apartment sales in excess of 100 dwelling units included in the evidence.
That's correct.
Okay. And so from a market perspective, would you agree that there are fewer buyers for a 300 plus unit apartment building as compared to, say, between 50 and 90 units?
You're right, it is only going to be the big players.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, sir.
Mr. Stephens, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time, thank you.
Mr. Micklef, do you know how many suites were the ones in the recent build and how many were the older ones?
You know what? I was just thinking that, and I don't have it off the top of my head. I know the first build, the older one, has a little over 200 units, and the second one would be, I guess, sort of make up like around 150-ish, I think,
Okay.
off the
Okay.
top of my head.
So that's an approximation then. So you don't know the exact number.
I know when I seen, like, I just kind of just looking at memory off the top of my head that the first build was over 200 units on
Okay.
the 1980 build. So the second one would be in the one, I want to say it's around 150.
And the model would take into account that the percentage of newer suites to older when it's
Yes, it would take
model
into
cap rate?
account the blending of the property.
Okay. Yeah. So the model would take that into account, though. So the model would have that information. Correct?
Sorry, my lights just turned off. What did you say?
I'm saying would the model have had those numbers when deriving the cap rate?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions. Okay.
Can you turn the lights on, please, just because I'm in a hearing here? And I need to, thank you. Sorry.
No
That's
problem.
actually quite funny.
Okay,
Okay.
so this completes all of Mr. Horsborough's matters. So, Mr. Horsborough, you,
no.
No,
Mr. Chair, I haven't presented yet.
yeah,
oh, you're right. You haven't presented yet. Um,
Sorry, there's been lots
excuse
going.
me. Excuse me. Yes, for sure. Would you please you put forward your evidence at this point? And I apologize to you.
Thank you,
Getting
Mr.
stuff
Chair.
here. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so again, we're discussing 429 Westwood Drive with an assessed value of $73,723,000. If the board will follow me along to page 3 of the disclosure, MNP has determined that the fair market value for the subject property is just slightly lower than what's been assessed. We've determined that the market value is $68,584,000. On pages 4 and 5, we have the assessment income workup for the property. And on page 6, we have MNP's income workup for the property. I won't go over the financials in detail as the assessor and I have agreed that the net income as shown on page 6 is agreeable to both of us, as it does reflect the actual financial performance of the property.
Yeah, Mr. Horsborough, I agree. It comes down to whether a 5.2 cap rate is reasonable or a 5.45. So
Okay, so I'll stick to the cap rate for this presentation. And as you'll recall in my previous presentation, I discussed the mortgage equity method. So I'll also save the board from having to listen to that again. So
okay.
I know that's relatively dry. But I will move on then to page 9. So MNP has looked at sales of some buildings that are somewhat comparable. Again, acknowledging that sales of 300 plus unit apartment blocks are few and far between. We have found at least one sale, 1833 Pembina Highway, which sold for $160,000 per dwelling unit. The subject property has been assessed around $200,000 per dwelling unit. Our determination of the market value of the subject property brings the value down to $186,000 per dwelling unit, which falls in line with what apartment buildings sell for in Winnipeg. With that, on pages 10, 11, 12, and 13, we have some photographs of the apartment building sales throughout Winnipeg in recent years. And then on page 14, MNP has attempted to derive capitalization rates for a number of property sales in Winnipeg. Again, applying parameters for vacancy and expense allowances as what's typical in the market. And then we've again used CMHC data to derive what the rental rates would be for these properties. So these are actual sale prices with the sale dates. And then applying what we consider to be market expenses, market vacancy, market rents, we're able to derive a capitalization rate. We can see that the capitalization rates range from about 4.5% to about 7.5%. Now, I should acknowledge, again, sales of apartment buildings in excess of 100, 200, 300 units are few and far between. The sale that's most comparable to the subject property is 1833 Pembina Highway, which had 140 dwelling units when it was sold, and it was sold with what was likely a 5.4% capitalization rate. Considering the size and the limited number of potential buyers for the subject property, we feel that in order to take on the risk of purchasing such a huge property, When there are alternative investment options, we feel that a 5.45% capitalization rate is reasonable. 5.2 might be more reasonable for something that is more accessible and more easily marketable to a greater number of investors. But for an asset like this, you're going to need a solid return on your investment, and not, a 5.25%, 5.2% rate of return. You're going to need something a little more substantial. So now pages 5, 16, 17. This just pertains to the income analysis that we did for the property. Anyway, those can be ignored. We've agreed on what the net operating income ought to be, and the majority of the appendix is not particularly relevant. It's, again, financials that the assessor and I have already agreed to. So with that, I would bring the board's attention to page 18, the conclusion of this presentation. So with that being said, I would ask that respectfully the board revise the assessment to reflect the fair market value and apply a capitalization rate that's appropriate for a building of this size and scale. And with that, I'd welcome any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. McCulloch, any questions?
So the question just on direct comparison of 1833 Pembina on your page 9, would you agree that 1833 Pembina is a 1972 build, whereas the subject has a 2012 build on it?
The 2012 is the city's opinion as to an effective age. My understanding is that most of the property was built in 1983.
Okay.
So a 9-year difference.
Are you aware that the second building on that property was actually built in 2012?
Yes, I know. So you've got about half the units are from the 80s, and half are a bit more modern.
Okay. So if a purchaser was buying this, they would be getting a new build with
It's not a new
build. Okay.
It's a 12-year-old build.
In regards to the cap rate, so the sale of 1833 Pembina, it didn't go through land test, but you can verify that it actually sold for 22.5 million?
That's what we have, yes.
Okay. And was that information you received from the purchaser or the vendor?
I don't recall the source of that information, but
Okay.
I'm under oath. I take the oath seriously, and I can confirm that that is the actual sale price.
Okay, fair. Now, to get the income of 1833 Pembina, did you use reported income or did you use market rents?
We used market rent.
Okay, so you didn't use any financial information that would have been disclosed leading up to the sale?
The actual financial performance of the property, we don't have that information. It's a market. Everything's market derived.
Okay. Those are all my questions, and I do have rebuttal for this property once the questions are done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCulloch. Mr. Stebbins, any questions?
No, my questions were answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, so Mr. Horsborough, I just from what Mr. McCulloch asked you, insofar as 1833 Pembina Highway is concerned, you indicated it was a share transfer, not it didn't go through land title's office?
That's my understanding.
So there would be income tax ramifications then, wouldn't there, on the final sale price?
I'm not certain.
Well, if you sold the property, there'd be recaptured depreciation. When you sell shares, there's a capital gain. Would that not be
a capital gains tax? Yeah.
Yeah, a capital gains, which is a lot less than recapture would be.
Yes.
So that would actually be reflected in the price. So you can't know because you don't know how much recapture there might be on the books.
Well, I don't know for a fact that it was a share sale.
Oh, I thought you said it was. I asked you that question. I think you said it was because it was indicated it didn't go through the land title's office, so it'd have to be a share sale then.
Yeah, I would guess, but I don't know for a fact.
Okay, well, if there was a share sale, there would be, you acknowledge, there would be income tax
Yes.
ramifications
Yes,
that
sir.
would reflect the final purchase price.
Yes.
So it would be a fair comparable in that case then.
Well, yes, yes and no. Like the extent of those ramifications and what impact it had on the sale price, it's tough to really determine. But certainly it would be impacted to some degree.
Okay, that's my only questions. Thank you very much. And
Sorry,
Mr.
so Mr. Mikulak, he should have given his rebuttal after his presentation.
Well, he can give us a rebuttal at this point. The fact of the matter is, I guess I'll ask you, have you seen the rebuttal yet?
I have not.
I'm rebutting a property on his presentation though. So why, like, I wouldn't give that ahead of time.
No, I understand that. The fact of the matter, what I'm saying is though, absolutely, I just think that Mr. Horsfall should see the rebuttal to make sure he's got no objections to it first.
Oh,
And
no, for sure, absolutely.
Okay.
I submitted it yesterday, so.
Okay.
I do not have their rebuttal at this
I
time.
just sent it to you, Mr. Horsburgh. It
Okay,
should-
Okay, thank you, Zachary.
okay, we'll hear you, Mr. Horsfall, before we determine whether we'll see it. I'll hear what you have to say.
Okay, thank you.
And just making sure the panel is able to access it right now.
I cannot.
I don't want to access it yet anyway, because I want to hear what Mr. Horsborough has. If he's objecting to it, I want to hear what the Egyptians are.
Okay, for sure.
I've got it.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I have an objection. The assessor's introducing new evidence.
Okay, well, how's it new evidence then? If it's not just rebutting you, I haven't seen it, you know.
He's providing reported income and expense information for 1833 Pembina Highway. I haven't provided any of their actuals.
Okay, I can see Mr. McCulloch, you know, we've already know that it's a share transfer if that's the case. And I know it's basis because of the income tax ramifications. I don't know how valuable that is anyway. Do you want to proceed with your rebuttal?
Yeah, so this rebuttal here.
I don't, sorry, I don't have the rebuttal yet.
I don't got it either yet. I'm not saying, I'm asking you, Mr. McCulloch, are you going to proceed with it? I've already indicated that I don't know if it's a fair comparable anyway, because it was a share.
Fair enough. To speed it up, we can let it go.
Because you acknowledge if it is a share transfer, the price will be reflected on income tax consequences.
I mean, again, this is why we find it hesitant to use them, but these get brought forward as evidence to support applicants' case for cap rate, and weight was placed on it. So I just wanted to show, based on information that we have, why that cap rate wasn't what they had stated based on report information. But in this case, we can forego this. That's fine.
Yeah, because the basis is,
talk about it.
yeah, because you can't really derive a cap rate on a share sale and equate it to something that went through land title's office.
Okay, no, fair enough. I mean, I looked up this property. We have no record of a sale in our system for this property, so it wouldn't have gone through land titles.
Okay, and actually though, I'm going to say, Mr. Horsborough, that would be satisfactory for rebuttal because it's something you brought up, and it wouldn't have been available to Mr. Mikulak to provide in his original information because he didn't know you're going to be referring to this property at the time. Anyway, but that's besides the point. Since Mr. Mikulak is not going to proceed, we're satisfied. So we've heard this matter. If anybody would like to make a summation at this point on all the properties before Mr. Horsborough leaves the meeting, I'll give you opportunity to do so at this time.
I don't think I need to do a really long summation, just that we've provided a sound fundamental basis for how we've captured our cap rates. And so again, our assessments are derived the same way by taking the income in the prior year and then applying that valuation, and our cap rate sales also reflect that exact same manner, where we've taken the income from the year prior, reported to the city, and used that in regards to come up with our cap rate evidence. So that would be my summation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hertzborough, thank you for your evidence and your attendance and your presentation. And before you go, if you have any summation you wish to make, we're here to listen to it at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief summation, just a sentence or two for each property. So we started today with 25 Cromwell, acknowledging that the information available to us is dated. There's still the reality of rent control. And while ideally I would have liked to be able to point to the current financials, really there's no way for the financials to have varied significantly from what they were in 2019 to what they are currently due to rent control legislation. So I would hope that the board, while acknowledging that information isn't perfect, that it couldn't have varied too substantially over the years. With regard to 1145 Dakota, again, I want to just reiterate the burden of proof lies on the assessor. The assessor hasn't provided any information in support of such a low cap rate for a seniors living facility when there's ample evidence in support of the cap rate that I've pushed for on that property. And again, with regard to 429 Westwood, 1833 Pembina likely was a share sale. I don't know that for a fact. That property, it was in the news quite a bit. It was related to a person who owned it at the time was quite a public, well-known person, a former premier. So we do know that property sold. Whether it was a share sale, that's possible. I don't know for a fact, but it might have been. Aside from 1833 Pembina, we do have other sales in that table showing what market-derived cap rates are for apartment buildings. So I guess to summarize, I would encourage this board not to take the assessor's word as gospel and see that there is market evidence for the values that MNP has pushed for in today's hearings. And I thank the board for their time and for their consideration today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question?
Certainly.
Did you hear back from your client in regards to the value that the city assessed since we started this?
Let me just check my email quickly here.
Mm-hmm.
I have not heard back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, we'll make decisions and everything, Mr. Hertzborough. You receive them in short order, and thank you again for your attendance and your evidence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Mikulik.
Thank you.
Okay, goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay.
Can we take a quick break while we get sorted out with the next?
And I thought this was a good time to take a break since Mr. Smith is now coming in to handle the rest of the matters. So
Yeah.
How much time do you require, Mr. Mikulik?
Just, I don't know, up to 10:30 is fine.
10:30. Okay, so we'll resume at 10:30, which is about 8 minutes from now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Smith. I understand you've got the rest of the items on our agenda today. So you can be sworn in now, and after so doing, we'll proceed with your first item, which is 919 St. Anne's Road.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Trevor Smith.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, yes.
Thank you. You may be seated.
I apologize for my voice, everyone. Started fading yesterday, so.
Oh, maybe we'll get lucky.
Just let me know.
Okay,
I'm sorry I missed that.
Mr. McCullough, when you're ready, you can proceed with your evidence on 919 St. Anne's Road.
Oh, absolutely. 24, file number 24-3991, roll number 08005683300, 919 St. Anne's Road, roll year 2025, assessed value 12,456,000. Classification 20, liability is taxable. We have a 5-story apartment built in 1999 with 64 suites. There's the 64 indoor parking and 20 outdoor parking. And just so everyone's aware, getting ahead of it, this property is a life lease. It's a not-for-profit affordable life lease, as I have included that on page 8. And so I will touch on that a little bit more as I go along. Location wise, it's on 919 St. Anne's Road, so really just north of where Ward and St. Anne's intersect, and you could see there in behind is the Seine River, and then across that would be the Island Lakes community. So again, located in a good location and really close to a lot of amenities, public transportation, that sort of thing. Now, when we go to page 3 and you see our income value summary here, so when we look at the 64 2-bedroom, we have an average monthly rent of $1,522.92. That works out to a gross potential rent of $1,169,000 less the 3.6% vacancy. You have an effective gross income of $1,127,000, and you have with the expenses of 43.66, a net operating income of 635,232. Capitalization rate for this property is 5.10% to get the 12,456,000. Now, from the rental side of things on page 4, when we look at how this property would compare to other rents, I did provide some rental comparables. Now, this was built in 1999. You could see that the average monthly rent here, $1,522.92, and where other properties would fall in along the spectrum of $1,414, $1,499, $1,526. So from an income side of things, when we compare to our rents, that these rents are acceptable. Now, with life leases, we don't use their actual rents because they have paid something up front to have a reduced rental rate as they are living there. So when we look at these rents, we don't see how we are out of line on page 4. Now, on page 5, we do have our cap rates from our department, where the 20th to 80th percentile is between 4.75 to 5.45%. And then compared against other broker market analysis, Colliers, you could see 5 to 6, CBRE 4.5 to 4.25 on the low rise A's. Cushman Wakefield is 5 to 5.75 on the low rise. So we really think that just based on that, the 5.10 here seems appropriate and is reflective of market. Now, cap rate evidence we've supplied here on page 6 shows a group of sales that we've stabilized based on expenses and reported income to the city of Winnipeg, and what the cap rates we derived on those sales. Now, the income for these properties were gathered and used as the year before the sale, which would remain consistent in how we do our valuations of a property when comparing if a property's assessment seems fair based on income and expense information reported to us. If we go to page 8, so you could see here, I've provided the information as it relates to this property. So it's a 64 suite adult living apartment building. And so it's a project that was developed 5.29 acre riverbank site, bounded to the east of the Seine River and west of St. Anne's Road. So there's over 3 acres of natural riverbank woodland is being maintained in its undisturbed state for the enjoyment of the residents. The project has been developed as a not-for-profit lease. This arrangement provides the benefits of renting with privileges of ownership. So That's why, again, we've gone to compare with other rents in the market, because we know that their rents they have wouldn't be indicative of that. And then so residents benefit financially from the generosity of Vic Wyman Endowment, donating in excess of $250,000, not-for-profit operating for the life of the project, lower and longer-term borrowing rates via bulk mortgage financing. So you could see the benefits that they receive for here. Now, if we want to scroll down a little bit further at the end of the page, it said income generated by money invested in the life lease project is used directly to reduce the residents' monthly operating costs. And if we scroll here too, I had provided information of the building. So you could see that on page 9, an extensive area of multi-purpose amenity space has been designed within the building for use of the residents, includes a conservatory, multi-purpose room, kitchenette facilities, games, rec room, fireside lounge, library meeting room, common storage space. And then so these spaces can be reserved by the residents at no cost for their gatherings. And the building structure comprises of 100% non-combustible concrete and masonry materials, high quality finishes, and high degree of acoustic privacy. So the construction on this building is quite high end for the residents. So you are getting a high quality building with this property. Now, hallways are designed to be positively pressurized to eliminate the potential migration of cooking odors into public spaces of the building. So again, another feature that they really looked at a lot of the details here in the construction of it. So again, we have a really high quality build. And if you just look here at their income statement, now I always just provide it just for reference. So you could see the revenue they actually did generate off the rents were $1,248,096. So that is what they got, even with the reduced rate. We are at 1,169,603. So we're not even at the upper end of what they are even collecting, again, because we've gone and used a market rent comparison. But you could see that given the income here and the quality of the building in and of itself, I think that when you look at our overall value of 12,456,000 and a cap rate of 5.1, I think it's totally reasonable and supported based on our market information that we provided. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, any questions at this time?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a few. Some of the questions that I'll ask in the first property, if it's all right with the panel, if we can carry forward the questions and answers to the remainder of the properties as well.
That'll be satisfactory, Mr. Smith. We'll remember those questions. Just indicate each time that you would like us to just emphasize that you're putting them forward to game without asking them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Michalak, as you mentioned, property is a life lease facility, and you were indicating the reduction of operating costs because of it being a life lease. Our actual revenue for the property is somewhat higher than what the city has projected for the property, correct?
Yes.
All right. I'll move on to capitalization rate. And you had asked a question earlier with regard to evidence presented today. 1833 Pembina, your questioning was with regard to whether actual income expense from the property was used in deriving the capitalization rates. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Um, let's flip quickly to page number 5 of your brief. And this is with regard to the city's general assessment and how the capitalization rates for the model were developed. So bear with me, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the panel and the assessor. I just need to read through this quickly here. Second paragraph of page number 5. For the 2025 general assessment, April 1, 2023 reference date, capitalization rates were derived from model generated estimates of net operating income and sale prices that were time adjusted to April 1st of 2023. So the model, the city's model, the capitalization rates that are developed within the model are based not on the actuals of properties that transacted, but based on model generated estimates for income and expense and then time adjusted sales, correct?
That is correct.
So they are not based on the actuals of those transactions.
And I'm glad you asked that, and I just want to expand with that and saying, like, with the verification of mass appraisal, when we proceed to derive a cap rate, we have people who report all their income and expense information to us, and that is then used to come up with our cap rates with that drive the cap rate evidence that you see here on page 5. And then further on page 6, the one after this, we use individual properties then as a verification to show that where, like, are the model rates that it has generated, is that appropriate? So I would say we take it even a step further than what your typical assessment jurisdiction is really bound to do, which is to create these cap rates and give a range because it is a model generated value. But so yeah, I would say that we do factor in everybody's income and expense information to get these cap rates that we have today. And it's
Okay.
not maybe the individual property itself. The individual property itself is used in, say, a subject appeal to say, well, okay, now when we actually look at this property standalone, is it acceptable within the parameters that we provided?
Okay, so follow-up question on the same issue then. Would you agree that the cities, and I think it's evident when we look at our properties here today and in the past, would you agree that there's always variability between the city's projections for income and expense versus the actuals of properties themselves?
Yes, there can be variability, and which is why we also use the rent comparables just to show, like, is our rents out of line with the other properties that have income reported, just as a mass appraisal standard.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Mr. Stephenson, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
So I just want to make sure I'm aware of one thing, Mr. Who on a life lease, then the rents vary depending on how much equity the respective, I guess, tenants or owners, would call them what you will, have injected into the investment.
Yeah, now every one is kind of different. Some life leases are like, this is your flat rate, this is what we charge. Some allow maybe more to put down. Some allow people to sell, like I've seen them sold on MLS, depending on the property. So they're really unique individually in that regard, which is why we use the market comparison as just a market apartment when we're using the comparison assessment.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I wasn't aware of that. I thought that all life leases, the tenants or the owners, whatever you can call them, what you will, inject money, and that reduces the amount of a mortgage required for the whole project.
Yeah.
And so the rent is then based on the equity the person has put in it, because it reduces the mortgage, which does not have to bear interest on a monthly basis.
Yeah, they're all so different, sort
Okay.
of in their fine details and makeup.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. So thank you. I learned something new today. I'm looking at your comparables, rent comparables, and I note that all your comparables are built in the 70s, and this one is built in the 1990s, late 90s. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, would that reflect the cap rate?
Yeah, so the build year would affect the cap rate being what it is. Yeah.
And the other thing I noticed is that the gross floor area in the subject property is quite a bit larger than any of your comparables. Would that reflect the rent?
Well, so are you speaking to the gross floor area per unit?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the fact that this number also encompasses the number of common areas that are involved and gets distributed out. So that's not the actual, like the suite sizes would be smaller.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think I've got a better handle now. Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, you can proceed when you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So 919 St. Anne's Road, as already indicated, it is a seniors nonprofit life lease facility where the seniors residents sign on to a life lease for their unit for the period of their life or until they decide to exit. For the subject property, there is no equity buildup. They are not allowed to sell the property or sell, not the property, sell their lease interest in property on the open market and increase their return in that way. Upon exiting, the unit goes back to the nonprofit and they receive the money that they put in the first place. I'm going to save us all a bunch of time on our first property here, in that we're actually very close on both income, a little bit further apart on expenses, but ultimately we come down to a very similar net operating income. So there's a lot of discussion with regard to the income for the property. If you look at my page number 20, you can see that the fully occupied revenue for the property is actually somewhat marginally higher than what the city has projected in their model. So I don't think we need to cover that off in any greater detail. The expenses are marginally higher and we come down to a similar net operating income. I'll run through the expenses briefly and leave that up to you, but certainly the revenue is probably not something we need to spend our time on. As already mentioned, Mr. Michalak mentioned that the size of the suites is not 1,500 plus square feet, as he indicated. That takes into account the common areas of the property, and if you look in the back of his brief, you can see all the additional common areas that property such as this has on the main floor. So the 1,500 square feet is obviously not the true unit size. So not to think that they're moving into elaborate units here or anything of that nature. We begin on my page number 3. Pardon me. You can see some background for the subject property. built in 1999, sits on 2.5 acres, total 64 units. All of them being 2 beds, with some of them having a small den area as well. It was obviously developed as a nonprofit seniors life lease facility. So built in 1999. Also on that page, you can see the prior year's appeal history, and that we are under appeal at the municipal board for 2023. And flip forward, photos begin on page 5. You can see some of the common areas on page number 6 and 7, and then we get into the units themselves. So built in 99, it is of that vintage. It has not been updated since that time, and units remain original to that date of construction. Site is shown on page number 10, and as Mr. Mekalaki indicated, it is in the St. Patel area on St. Anne's, just to the north of Ward Avenue. So I'm going to pass over the income section, if that's all right. We can certainly cover it if you wish, and move on to the expenses. The City of Winnipeg 3.6% vacancy rate. If you look at the table for CMHC at the top, it's certainly reflective for the subject property. One thing that always comes up with seniors facilities is waiting lists, and I'm just going to address that now. You look at the market, you call up a market department and ask if they have a waiting list. Typically, they have a waiting list. If you call a seniors facility, typically they have a waiting list. So it's not that they're different in having waiting lists from other facilities. It's just that there are waiting lists for all multi-residential properties typically in the marketplace. Now, that doesn't mean that they're always 100% full. Obviously, seniors need to move for various reasons as well, and there does vacancy does occur in these types of facilities, so it's only proper to reflect that in the valuation. The expenses, we've stabilized them at the bottom of the page. You can see the 3 years history ranging between 532,000 and 608,000. We've stabilized these at $525,795, slightly lower than the lowest year of 2021, based on actuals or trends for the subject property as is proper, following the proper methodology. We've made adjustments where necessary, such as to property management, repair and maintenance, things of that nature. And we can move forward to capitalization rate. So I think this is a critical component, and this is why I brought it up in discussion of the city's model. So when you look at the city's model, as stated, the city's model is based on estimates. So it's not based on the actual income and expenses of a property that transacted with the actual transaction price as of the date that it's sold and what the resultant cap rate is, and then fed into the model. It's based on what that model projects as the income and expense over a sale price that is then time adjusted to the April 1, 2023 valuation date. So needless to say, the model's not going to be perfect. There's lots, virtually every property that we look at in multifamily, it's not going to be bang on what the actual income expenses are for that property. And if you get into time adjusting sales, well, the other thing to look at with regard to that is the investment market as of April 1, 2023, and the impact of interest rates at that time. So what would be the April 1, 2023 time adjusted value? Would it be increasing in the city's model, or would it be decreasing? Would it be staying the same? We'll get to interest rates in a minute, but needless to say, the model the model itself is certainly open to question. The other thing with regard to the model is in the period leading up to the valuation date, obviously we had significant change in both interest rates and mortgage lending rates, and this had a dramatic impact on commercial lending in the marketplace, and essentially had the impact of dramatically cooling the market in that lead up to the April 1, 2023 time period. If the cost of borrowing increases dramatically, that has an impact on investors' perception of market value, and obviously they have a return expectation that is required in making investments, and that will have an impact on what they would be willing to pay as of the valuation date. So again, we'll get into the interest rate description in a bit. Okay, capitalization rate by page number 16. This first bit here is with regard to nonprofit facilities. Bear with me while I run through this. It does have an impact, trust me, on capitalization rate. Determining market value for affordable housing properties for assessment purposes is challenging, as the properties do not transact in the marketplace typically, and therefore there are no directly comparable sales to utilize in determining market value. Additionally, social affordable housing properties cannot legitimately be directly compared to standard market apartment transactions, as social housing properties have considerable restrictions and burdens that are not present for market apartments. Rental income restrictions, rental market restrictions, smaller pool of tenants, additional operating expenses, as we've shown in our stabilization here, physical condition often, and then disposition restrictions, as well as other factors, can negatively impact the market value of a social housing property. I have a quote here from an expert in this particular field, Mr. Richard Bolton. He's an accredited appraiser, and in his book, Valuation and Market Studies for Affordable Housing, states, developing a market-derived cap rate for an income-restricted property begins with an analysis of the available rates for similar unrestricted properties. Then these rates are adjusted based on the risk factors that an investor would consider in developing a cap rate. Result is a cap rate based on market factors and associated risks. So essentially what he's stating there, that there would be an increased risk to any astute investor in looking at the purchase of a property such as this versus a standard market apartment. So I always like to make the comparison. If you take two properties built in the same year, identical, located side by side, one is a standard market apartment and one is a nonprofit of some kind, this one in particular being a life lease facility, there are certainly additional risks that an astute investor would factor into their purchasing of the nonprofit facility versus the standard market apartment. So the cap rate, needless to say, increases over what a standard market apartment would be. In the case of the subject property, it is a life lease facility. So you are purchasing a property in which each of the occupants, because they're not tenants, they're lessees. Each of the occupants has the right to remain in their individual unit for the remainder of their life under the terms of the lease that they signed on with for that particular facility. Now, That obviously changes things with regard to increasing of rents over time, etc. If they're locked in on that point, you're not going to be able to obviously change that property in any kind of immediate short-term window in order to make it a standard market apartment and then boost the rents and increase your revenue and return. So the risk is there without question, and the cap rates would be higher. Now, if we look at the actual market evidence for Winnipeg, we provide you with two charts on page 16 and 17 of actual market transactions. These are all market sales, and they sold for the prices indicated. And the capitalization rate is based on a review of the actual income and expense for the subject property as of the valuation date. So if we look at this closer, there's obviously a range in terms of size, age, location throughout the city. But our general range that we're looking at is a low of 5%, typically up to pardon me, typically up to 5.75, 6% as far as the upper end of the range for standard market apartments. Now, we can go through these in greater detail if you wish. I will point out that there is a dispute between agents and the city of Winnipeg with regard to the true capitalization rate for the sale of the most recently built property of any significant size, that being number 3, 2390 McPhillips. We have a cap rate of 5.25% for that particular property. Developed in 2015, sold in 2020, total of 90 units, trading at a 5.25% cap rate versus the city's their cap rate is for that particular facility. Flipping to page 17, you can see additional sales. These are closer in time to the reference period. And again, you can see a range there, a low for a single property, only 9 units, 4.6%, up to a high of 5.99, or sorry, 6.5%, with again the bulk of the properties being within that 5 to 6% range. Moving on, capitalization rate from major brokerages in the city. Now, there's major brokerages that do a lot of work, and then there are major brokerages that do somewhat less work. Peter Chibelis is relatively small in the city and doesn't have a particularly large office. So we have used Colliers International as well as Cushman & Wakefield, which again is also somewhat smaller in terms of their presence in the investment market. Page number 18, you can see we summarize 3 different cycles with regard to capitalization rate and the stated cap rate range from Colliers in their Canada cap rate report. These are for the last 3 cycles, 2018, 2020, and 2023. The first chart indicates cap rate range of 5 to 6% for 2018. 2020 again is indicating a cap rate of 5 to 6% for both low and high rise, and for 2023 they're also indicating a cap rate of 5 to 6%. Now they've subsequently issued a correction to this for the 2023 year, increasing their cap rate range from 5.5% to 6.5%, taking into account the interest rate environment as of the valuation date. Pardon me. Moving on, Cushman & Wakefield, page number 19. Again, a little less of a presence in the market. They're indicating high rises trading from 4.75 to 5.5%. And low rise is between 5 and 5.75%. Now, all of this being said, the social housing aspect we've discussed. What needs to be taken into account is the market as of that valuation date. So if you scan down my page number 19, and I realize I'll be preaching to the choir here, probably a little bit to one of your members, but if you look at that highlighted text, you can see the Bank of Canada interest rates rose from 0.5% historic lows in spring of 2022 up to 4.75% as of the valuation date of April 1st of 2023. Now, what impact does this have? Well, obviously, there will be a direct impact in the mortgage lending environment. They are linked. It's not a one-to-one situation where you get an increase of 1% in interest rate, therefore you get a 1% increase in mortgage lending rate necessarily. There's obviously some variability there, but an increase of 4% over a 1-year time span is going to have a significant impact on the mortgage rate that you can borrow at to purchase a property. Now, what happens if you have an increased cost of borrowing? Well, that obviously decreases the return to you with regard to the income that you will receive overall, as the cost that you're putting out is significantly greater. And that will have an impact directly on what you would be willing to pay for that property. Now, if you're willing to pay less for that property, obviously this will drive a higher capitalization rate. These are not, this is not speculative. It's not theory. If you go back in time and you look at the rise of interest rates from Bank of Canada, you will see a linkage with mortgage lending rates as well. So that will obviously drive higher capitalization rates. So looking at all of this information, with again, the range typically being 5 to 6, 5 to 5.75%. We have used the upper end of the range at 5.75% to take into account the additional risk that an investor would take on in the acquisition of a facility such as this. So our exercise is to determine fair market value. I believe, as already mentioned in another instance earlier today, these properties are valued by the city directly as standard market apartments, and that's fine. It's certainly one way to value the properties, but what can't be ignored is that they're not market apartments, and there is increased risk that any investor would take on in the acquisition of these properties. So while the model, the methodology works, it doesn't reflect the situation on the ground essentially, and that has to be taken into account in the final valuation as well. So we've used a 5.75% capitalization rate. If you look at my page 20, this is summarized. Our rental income, standard vacancy, expense allowance that is stabilized, and we come to an NOI of 629,809. The city being at 635,232. They're very close in this particular instance. Cap rate of 5.75% produces our final market value of $10,953,000. And that is my presentation. I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, so just on page 16, you had referred to a statement about this being valuation studies for affordable housing. Would you agree, though, that this is a life lease where people are paying an entrance fee to get in and not affordable housing like, say, a Manitoba housing would be?
I would agree with you that it's not a Manitoba housing type of situation. However, it is intended to be affordable nonprofit housing. That's the mandate of the organization, and the life lease that they've provided is not of an elaborate nature. So yes, they do need to pay an amount to get into it, but again, we're valuing it as a market apartment. I believe our revenue is higher than what the city is projecting.
Okay. Are you aware of what the buy-in is, or how much they have in the fund that they would receive from tenants, of what they're holding?
Again, and I'll answer your question. No, I'm not aware of the fund, but this focus in life leases on how much money do they have in the fund, what do they pay into it. Our revenue is higher than the city's. I don't know that we're not looking at a situation where where there's a significant additional revenue source or anything of that nature for the property, and there is no equity upside where individuals can trade their life lease on the market and receive more than what it was worth. It's not a situation like that.
And just regarding I know you had mentioned something about Colliers. Are you aware that in their report, there's a disclaimer that the way they derive their cap rates are based on the net operating income the year after the sale and not the year preceding the sale?
I am indeed aware of that, and that is something that investors take into account when they are looking at the acquisition of property.
Would you agree that the city of Winnipeg, when they produce their assessments, were looking at the income of the most recent year leading up to the assessment? Would you agree?
I know that that is how the city does it, yes.
And then in regards to the cap rate, just the overall cap rate sales on 16 and 17, were these all stabilized by you for their net operating income?
The properties were all examined in detail and stabilized, correct?
Have they all transacted through land titles?
I don't recall each individual one off the top of my head with regard to whether they were all through land titles, but I believe certainly the majority of them would be, yes.
Okay. Is there any sales in here that you would be placing more of a weight on in terms of determining your value? Or is it just you're kind of looking at a range and then applying your own adjustment to that?
We're essentially seeking to provide a snapshot of the market in order to help frame an appropriate cap rate for each of the properties that we're looking at today.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mikulich. Mr. Stephenson, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, any questions?
Yeah, I just have to, I have to find the page now that I was looking at. And now I'm not gonna find it probably. Just give me a second here. Of course, when I want something I can't find it right away. It's the capitalization rate where you're talking on page 16. So in there, it says that the smaller pool of potential tenants. So in a life lease, is there not a huge number of people in most life leases waiting to get in? They have a huge list of people, and when it comes time to apartment comes available, they have a whole bunch of people coming to look at it.
So we're getting into the issue of wait times, or
Right.
the terminology I'm sorry. My voice is
I know.
leaving me here for a minute. Sorry about that. The waiting lists, as I'd stated, and yes, are there wait lists for life lease facilities? Certainly. Are there wait lists for standard market apartments? I can call up Boardwalk or any of your main ownership or management groups here, and there will be a waiting list for me to sign up for apartments. So they really aren't different in that way.
But you're saying here that there's a smaller pool of potential tenants for
Yes.
this life lease. Is that what, correct?
So the smaller pool of tenants is with regard to the rental universe. So, and we're looking at it as a standard market apartment, right? So if you look at standard market apartment, everybody can rent it. You can be 99, you can be 18 and rent a unit. If you're looking at facilities such as this, there are age restrictions on it. So it is a smaller pool of tenants.
Okay. All right, and then you talk about that they can't do renos easily. There was something in there that you were talking about that when they move in, that's how the apartment is. But what if the client who moved in wanted to do renovations? They can do renovations, but they can't get anything more back. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Does that meet your questions, Ms. Knight?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Smith, I guess a couple of things. One thing that Ms. Knight asked you about was waiting list. So if the city model is reflecting a 3.6 vacancy factor, in fact, that is something that is being utilized because the model takes that for all properties in the city. And it's only fair that if they're comparing it to other market rents, that the same vacancy factor be reflected on a property such as the subject property. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And looking also at that, the suites are, we found out, a lot less than 1,500 square feet because there are common areas. This building, if it was a market building, do you think that having these common areas that the tenants can all use at no cost might be reflective in the rents that could be obtained by the owner?
I think that the rents that they are paying, which again are somewhat higher than what the city has, are certainly fair market rental rates.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if this building was offered as a market rental building, would the amenities not influence a prospective tenant to maybe be prepared to pay more rent because they have those amenities available to them?
Well, I guess my comment, Mr. Chair, would be they're already paying significant rent. I don't believe there's an upside here on the rental side.
Okay, that's fair. You answered my question. The next question is, I'm looking at your cap rate comparables on page 16 and 17, and you indicated that some of those properties went through land title suffers and some didn't. You know which are which?
No, I didn't indicate that. The city questioned whether any of them had gone through as share sales. I stated, I believe the vast majority, and I did look at this. I didn't review before I came into the hearing today, but typically our transactions are through land titles, and obviously we have access to the actual income and expenses for them in developing the cap rate. So I can't point you to one that may have been a share sale, but again, you can rely on the fact that, again, I'm under oath, and for as far as I recall, for the most part, these are all land title transactions.
Okay, so you're saying that they're all land titles transactions?
No, I'm saying the vast majority of them are land title transactions.
Okay.
I cannot tell you individually, property by property, the detail on that, is that's not typically something we do in this forum.
Okay, but in fact, would you agree that a share transaction might take into account, because of the share transaction, a lower sale price. Because the
That entirely depends on the property and the situation and the income and expense profile, et cetera. So I really can't comment on that.
I'm asking you just a general question. If you have a property that is a share sale transaction, and there's huge recapture on the books, without that, and somebody's prepared to buy shares, without that reflect the purchase price that would transact.
Now, Mr. Chair, and respectfully, we're getting into speculation with regard to the situation of a theoretical sale that may have large recapture on it. I really don't want to comment on that.
Well, I know, but I'm trying to use your page number 16 and 17, and to have any semblance of whether I can place any reliance on them, I have to know.
Well, and respectfully,
or if they went through Lanto's office.
I'm afraid I don't have an answer for you.
Okay, thank you. That completes my questions. So we can now proceed then to our next agenda item, which is the property at 333 Ward Avenue.
You know what? I need like 3 minutes to go for a bathroom break. Can I come back at like 11:25?
You can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll adjourn to 11:25. Thank you. If you then proceed then with item on agenda number 6, 333 Ward Avenue. Mr. Mikulik, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Okay, we have file number 24-3709, roll number 08021144100, 333 Ward Avenue, roll year 2025, assessed value 22,470,000, classification 20, liability is taxable. We have, I have made a recommendation to reduce the value here to 21,268,000. And on page 10 is where I had done that. So that's using a net operating income of 1,031,504 and our cap rate of 4.85%.
Okay. And Mr. Smith, is that acceptable?
Unfortunately, I haven't heard back from the client for this particular rec, so I can't accept on their behalf.
Okay, so Mr. Mikulik, please proceed.
Okay, now can I ask just the Mr. Smith, my NOI on the recommendation is 1,031,504, and I'm seeing you're at 1,043,869. So can we agree for this property that we'll go with my NOI, and we will proceed with a cap rate discussion?
Certainly, we can certainly save ourselves some time in doing that. I am fine with using your NOI. Ours is obviously higher than yours, so I'm not seeking an advantage in that way or anything.
Yeah.
But if you believe that's accurate, then we can defer to that.
Okay, sounds good. So just going back here now to the description of the property, we have a 2 buildings, 3 stories, so they're low rise, built in 2006 with 103 suites. They have 103 outdoor and 40 indoor parking. It's located on the corner of Ward and St. Mary's, as you can see on page 2, another really good neighborhood in South St. Vital. Now, if we look at the income value summary of the property, so just because this is cap rate, we are at a 4.85% capitalization rate. And again, leading to the charts on page 5 and 6 that we had touched on prior in that last property, just the whole breakdown of how the assessment department comes up with these cap rates. Feeling like this one 4.85, given that it is on the newer end of the spectrum and the location. being involved at 4.85, I think that is acceptable based on the type of income stream that this property is going to be generating. When you look at on page 8, I had just provided the like a snippet of the property itself. So it's a 3-story apartment home featuring spacious modern suites and host of lifestyle amenities. So you could see what it offers. It's all utilities included, in-suite laundry, in-suite storage, open concept kitchen, living area, the rates for parking, pet friendly, fitness center, social room, outdoor patio, etc. Now on page 9, I did provide pictures that they did have on their website. So you could see the indoor parking is through a garage setup, not like a heated type underground situation. But you could see the amenities offered to the tenants. Suites are very well maintained, well cared for. The owner of this portfolio owns a number of large complexes like this in the city of Winnipeg. They run apartments very tight. They produce a steady, solid income, as you could see over the years that I've provided their income statement. So from that end, it is a solid revenue generating stream. I think based on what the information we have done with 2390 McPhillips, and we're at a 4.85 here, that would put us on the lower end as well with the broker markets, as you could see with CBRE and Cushman. I think that really there's no reason here to move more on the cap rate. I think we capture the value quite well in terms of how the properties run, the stable income stream that it's providing. And so, yeah, that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mithelt. Mr. Smithwing, if you have any questions, you can ask them now.
I have no questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, any questions?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Steffens, any questions?
No questions at this time, thank you.
And I don't either, so Mr. Smith, you can proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So 333 Ward Avenue, as already described, it is located in St. Vital, and it was built in 2006, so it's not a new property, it's not an old property, but we're going on 18 years old at this point. The parking as referenced, the indoor parking is garage parking. It's for 40 stalls out of 103 units, so certainly it is an amenity. It's not as though it were new underground parking for all of the occupants or anything, though. We're not disputing, obviously, the NOI. I will point out that the NOI that we've developed for the property based on the actuals is marginally higher than what the city is projecting. I will leave that to the panel to determine. And we can look at the subject property itself. So nearly all 2 bedrooms, 101 out of 103 units, 2 of them being 3-bedroom units. This is on my page number 3. Photos of the interior of the property as well as the exterior. As you move through here, you can see they are certainly good quality residential. Nobody's arguing that. It hasn't gone through a full renovation or anything of that nature. The site is shown on page number 8 at the corner of Ward and St. Mary's, and the location on page number 9. I will skip through the income and expense. Suffice it to say, we went through the actuals and arrived at our NOI based on stabilization of the expenses as well as the actual income for the property as of the valuation date, but we can move forward to capitalization rate. Now, this is a standard market apartment. It's not a nonprofit. It's not a assisted living or anything of that nature. So when we look at the market, well, what does the market tell us? Again, we have the same capitalization rate study provided on page number 14. I will point out again 2390 McPhillips transaction, number 3 on the first chart. A newer property built in 2015, total of 90 units, so comparable in that way. Transacting in 2020 had a cap rate based on the actuals for the property of 5.25% as of the valuation date. I will point out that the city has a different cap rate developed for this, and there are other appellants that have higher cap rates than what I have indicated here, again, based on the actuals. So you can never, you can't take one property and determine that that is what the market. So that's not what I'm doing here. I'm simply pointing out the most recent transaction of the newest built, largest property transacting in the city. So we're looking at 5.25% in 2020. Now, that's one property. Obviously, there could be variability if there were other transactions of a similar size, nature, age, etc., around that time frame. But it does give you an indication of cap rate range. The other one I'll point out, and this is different, I'll acknowledge, is 100 Southview. Now, this is sale of townhome development built in 2015, 148 units, selling in 2021 at 4.95%. Now, in speaking directly with the principals involved in the transaction, property was not acquired with sole intent of operating it as a rental property. It was acquired for conversion to condominiums and then the sale of those condominiums in order to increase the return to the purchaser. So that is reflected in the purchase price being higher than it typically would be, and obviously the cap rate being lower than it typically would be. That aside, we have the same general capitalization rate range of a low of 5% up to that 5.75%, 6% range. Obviously, there are outliers. If we look at the more recent transactions, they are all significantly smaller and of older properties. But again, they typically fall in that 5 to 6% range. Obviously, some variability in that as well. Now, looking at the market participants, exact same information. Colliers is indicating 5.5 to 6.5%. I know I don't have that in the addenda for this, unfortunately, as I didn't have it when this was put together. If you take what we have published here, 5 to 6%. We're looking at low rise from Cushman Wakefield. We're looking at 5 to 5.75%. Now, none of those falling under 5%. These are the main market participants in investment grade multifamily sales in the city. So the range, again, typically being that 5 to 5.75%. Outside of that, without question, there's an impact on capitalization rates based on the rise in interest rates, 4%. Over the period from spring of 2022 to the valuation date. There really is no arguing that point. Capitalization rates are going to rise over that span of time. So we have applied a cap rate of 5.5% to the subject property based on this analysis. And this is summarized on page number 18. giving us our final market value of 18,979,000. And I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McLean, questions?
Yeah, so just regarding this property and the income, would you agree like that over the last few years, the income has been steadily increasing? It is a solid income producer?
As with most most apartments, the income steadily increases. Yes, that is why apartments are considered generally the safer investment asset class.
And then I guess the rest of my questions for Cap had been asked previously, so if those could be applied, I don't think I need to touch on further. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Steffes, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions, so thank you.
I forgot to mention, Mr. Chair, just to carry forward my questions and answers from previous. Thank you.
Absolutely, that's fair. Okay. So we can next then proceed to item number 7 on the agenda, which is the property at 1295 Dakota Street. And Mr. Miklick, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Okay. We have a file number 24-3994, roll number 0800-807-3400, address 1295 Dakota Street, roll year 2025, assessed value 10,526,000. Classification here is 40S, so this property is school tax exempt based on their status that I will be touching on as we go along. So we have a 3-story 1989 year built, number of suites 96, 71 outdoor parking. We have a location on page 2, which is similar location to one of the other properties we had discussed today on Dakota Street earlier, right across from Dakota Community Center. So again, a really good location, great neighborhood, close to amenities that way. And when we go to our income value summary, so we have average rents here of $987.48. And that would give us a gross potential rent of $1,137,577. And when you subtract vacancy, their effective gross income and expenses, you get the net operating income of $557,853, utilizing a capitalization rate here of 5.3%. Now, when we do look at this property in terms of rental comps on page 4, we do see that it would fall in line with other properties. In fact, maybe some of them slightly lower, but I think we've based on the market rent comparables here that we have that I think its income level is acceptable. Now, I also did a CMHC rent analysis for this, considering that we wouldn't really be using their actuals in this regard because this is like a life lease that's has a license around it, which is why they're 40S. Now, when I compared to just CMHC market rents and we average out the 3, so we have the zone rents, we have what the rents would be based on year of construction with CMHC, we have the structure size being 96 on where that falls in with CMHC. On page 6, you could see how that falls in line with the model rents. So our rents we have in place on this property coming in at 968. It reaches about 78% of what true market rents are on the weighted averaging. So we are factoring in again this type of situation with the property being what it is. And cap rate again, I think so. We're at 5.3 on this one. I mean, I think based on the information on page 7 and page 8 that was touched on earlier, I think we're being more than reasonable here with cap rate on our end. Now, page 10, you could see I don't have interior pictures of it, but I did this is what it looks like from the exterior. So just straight from Google, you could see the building's going to be well maintained. I did provide on page 11, they do have on their website, this is from 2018, like a buy-in, I guess. So you could see an entrance fee that people would pay to get into these buildings, and then what their rents would be. So monthly rental as of April 1st, 2018, you could see based on those amounts for those suites, how they get discounted. And we are at 968 per unit. So, or sorry, 987. So I do feel that we are acceptable in terms of applying income here. I feel that also, again, with cap rate being 5.3, we're trending even a slightly tick higher than some of the other ones we discussed earlier. I don't see a need here to have to reduce this value any further. And thus that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, any questions?
I have no questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Stephenson, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, sir.
And I don't either. Thank you. So, Mr. Smith, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So subject property we're looking at 1295 Dakota Street. It's already been described by Mr. Mikola. Built in 1989, we have a total of 96 units. In this case, 32 one beds and 64 2-bedroom units. Pardon me. And again, this is a seniors nonprofit life lease facility. And it is intended to be affordable housing. That is the mandate. That's why it was developed. And that is the way that the property is operated and intended to continue. Developed by the Faith Lutheran Management Corporation, registered nonprofit. Now, the 40S thing, again, we're not, this is not an appeal of taxes, it's an appeal of assessment. We're looking at market value and what the property would be on the market. So the taxable or untaxable nature of it is not in question here with regard to the value that's in appeal. So subject property, you're buying it at April 1st of 2023. Are you buying a standard market apartment? No, you're not buying a standard market apartment. What you're acquiring, and this can't be ignored because we're looking at what market value for the property would be. You're acquiring a nonprofit seniors life lease facility. Now, each and every one of those tenants has a life lease that's in there. For their particular unit, they have the right to occupy it under those terms until either their end of life or if they need to move for some reason for care, etc. Is that the same thing as acquiring a standard market apartment? No, it's not. You can't make adjustments to the terms of their lease. Their leases are what they are and are governed according to that. So obviously there are going to be differences between standard market apartment and property such as this. So page number 3 gives you some background on the property. Assessed at $10,526,000. Our market value for the subject is $8,488,000 based on the actuals for the property. You can see the 2023 history there, the reduction, which is under appeal to the municipal board. Moving forward, we have photos from the property itself, exterior, interiors. It is original to the date of construction. You can see the cabinetry in page number 6 of that vintage of 1989. It has not gone through any renovation or updating since that time. Again, the mandate is to provide affordable seniors housing. The site is shown on page number 9 and the location on page number 10. As I've stated on page 11, I've already discussed the leasehold interest that the tenants have with the right to remain until their end of life, essentially. And similar to the last life lease property, upon move out, they don't receive additional income. They simply receive back what they put in the first place. They also don't have the right to sell their leasehold market interest on the market. So let's look at the subject itself. Are the rental charges for the subject property within market range? Pardon me. Well, on page number 12, you can see the standard rental range for 1-bedroom units, 779 to 811, and 2 bedrooms, 991 to 994, giving us a gross rental income of $1,038,468. Pardon me. Those are as of April 1, 2023. We've given you CMHC as CMHC averages for both the area and Winnipeg overall. Obviously, these are somewhat under that. And again, that is reflective of the nonprofit nature and the affordable housing mandate that they have. Are they under market? Well, perhaps, but they are locked in. So if you're acquiring this property, this is what you're receiving. You don't receive a speculative additional income that you might get on the property. This is what you get. Looking forward into the expenses, we're not in dispute over vacancy. We've applied 3.6%. Our expense allowance is on page 15. We go through the 3-year stabilization. And I think this is a critical part to notice as well. Their actual expenses ranged from particularly low year, 477,000 up to 725,000 over that 3-year time span. We've stabilized this amount at $616,429 for the valuation date. Now, you can see the adjustments we've made. We've brought down property management. We've brought down the repair and maintenance quite significantly. Obviously, in an older original property such as this, there's going to be higher expenses on R&M. We've brought that down to a normalized industry average of $1,500 per unit. And you can see the balance there. So the stabilized expenses would be $616,429,000. Now, this would give you almost 62% as a percentage of effective gross income. We can't use that because that will lead to producing a misleading low market value for the property. But those are what the actual expenses are. They have higher expenses, and that would continue going forward. Now, in order to value the property for market value, we have deferred to the city's expense allowance percentage of 49.13%. But recognizing that the actual expenses are significantly greater than that. And these are all exclusively real estate expenses. Moving on to capitalization rate. I'm not going to run through my discussion with regard to these particular types of properties. Again, we've had that already. in detail. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on that front. Suffice it to say, the risk that an investor would take on in acquiring a nonprofit seniors affordable life lease facility side by side with a standard market apartment are significantly greater than what you would incur in buying a standard market apartment. You're not getting the same thing. So we have applied, as we did with the other one, the upper end of the range at 6% for the capitalization rate. Now, this is summarized on my page number 20. And you can see the details of that there. Actual rent, expenses being considerably higher than what we've used. We've deferred to the city's allowance of 49.13, giving us our NOI of 509,251. Capped at 6%, it gives you $8,488,000. Now, the key here is you can value it as a standard market apartment, but you need to take into account the actual restrictions and situation of the property as of the valuation date. So you're not buying a standard market apartment, you're buying this property with these restrictions. And needless to say, that would drive a higher cap rate in addition to the interest rate environment that we're operating in. So 6% gives you $8,488,000 as our market value for the subject. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Michalek, any questions?
Yeah, so page 20 with the rents, the 901 market rent, did that come from you using just their actuals, or was it like, did you factor in the entrance fees to that number? Or?
That is the actuals.
Okay. And then just in regards to, we discuss about the added risk of, say, an investor purchasing this. I'm looking in the addenda, like page A6, page A5, where it's showing all the cash on hand, the deposits, the interest, and that of the investments being earned. The purchaser would then also acquire this as well, which you wouldn't typically get in a regular market apartment. Is that fair to say?
So that's misleading, and I'll explain why. In a regular market apartment, you are receiving your net revenue as the owner of the property, and you can do what you wish with that as far as investing it. You don't need to retain it in that corporation, so they don't necessarily have the revenue that they've developed for that property contained within their statement sheets. So to say that the entrance fees provide an additional benefit to these nonprofit life lease facilities, again, is somewhat misleading. That as a resident leaves, they are required to pay back their entrance fee, obviously.
Okay, so on page A6, where it says a replacement reserve fund, you're acquiring $344,945 cash on hand, and you also have term deposit bearing interest at 2.5% for $150,000. You have cash, 10% entitlement reserve fund, and you have a number of investments. So wouldn't you say, though, that helps offset the operating costs, that you're already getting a base to do the work as opposed to having to pay out of your pocket?
That sounds remarkable when you state it that way. This must be quite the investment. So again, and
Answer the question, please.
I understand that, but there's always a slant to these things. The answer is that they're different animals. So when you have a standard market apartment, as a normal owner, you get the return that you get And you can, as a wise investor, set aside funds at that point for replacement reserve, which you should do. Not everybody does, but you have that profit that you've made that you could set aside. Does that show up in the books? No, it doesn't. If you, what you do with the remainder of your profit, whether you invested in the market in an interest returning product such as they have here, it's not the same thing. We're not looking at a situation where a nonprofit has greatly increased revenue streams that a market apartment would not have access to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Matt, any questions?
I did have one question now. Where the heck shoot? Page again. In regards to your page 3, you're saying that that's currently appealed to the municipal board, or that's where it finished?
It's still under appeal. It hasn't been scheduled at this.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Mr. Stevenson, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Smith, I'm referring to your income workup on page 20. So you're using actuals there, correct?
That's correct.
Is that fair when the rents are restricted because they're supposed to be affordable to the tenants?
Well, Mr. Chair, they're not significantly different than what the city has projected. And as I'd stated, if you were to acquire this property on the valuation date, it doesn't change the rents that you're going to receive from the tenants. So projecting a greater rent than they're actually going to receive as an investor in acquiring this property, again, that's not reality.
Okay. And the entrance fees, which form a fairly large pool of capital, you're saying that that should not impact on the rents that are paid by the various occupants of the property? Is that your evidence?
I'm not saying that at all. In fact,
Okay.
I didn't say that it doesn't change the rental structure that we pay.
Well, okay, but if you say that if that's the case, that it would reflect on the rents, though, would it not?
It does, in fact, reflect on the rents. That's
Okay.
the whole purpose of them in the first place. What goes along with that, though, which is, I believe, perhaps not being given the light that it should, is that the situation with in comparison to a standard market apartment is that you're free to set the rents at whatever you wish in that standard market apartment. That's not the case here. It's has the mandate that it has, and if it were to sell, it would transact exactly how it is, which would not change the income or expense profile of it. So the NOI that I come to is actually dramatically lower, or rather dramatically higher than what it would be, because the expenses are significantly greater than what I've relied upon.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. So that then takes us to our item number 8, which is the property at 200 Belleville Road. And when you're ready, Mr. Micklef, you can proceed.
Okay, we have file number 24-3693, roll number 0800413950, 200 Belleville Road, roll year 2025, assessed value 19,892,000, classification 20, liability taxable. We have 3 buildings with 2 stories, walk-ups, built in 1971, 150 suites with 162 outdoor parking. We could see on location where it's located on Belleville Road, just north of the Route 90, or sorry, Bishop Grandin. And so we have it's kind of, if you're looking for just a picture of the area, just there's a Home Depot there. There's a number of retail outlets, and St. Vital Mall would be on the south side at the southwest corner there. So it runs in behind that. And so again, another good location for rentals as well. Now, we look at the income value summary here of the 150 units. We're averaging out at 1245.84 per unit. And if you apply that into the income workup, we have our gross rents at 2242,512. And when you subtract expenses and effective gross income, you get 1,193,520. Now, this property has been applied a 6% cap rate. I mean, I think that's quite generous and probably too high. But for the purpose of this situation, we would allow it based on confirmation of value. Have we really dug into this further? I think we'd be able to justify a lower cap rate on this type of property. Now, going forward to page 4, we have rent comparables here that would show where this property falls in line, being 1245.84 per unit. You could see the range here of other rent comps of similar properties. Now, you do have one on Belleville Road as well, 1432 per unit. Again, we're coming in at 1245. We feel that that's in line with the other comparable properties. Now, when you talk about cap rate, again, page 5 and 6, we discussed already. I mean, we're at 6% here, so we're already way on the high end. And if you look on page 8, I've shown you just some pictures here up from their website, what the suite amenities have, the building amenities, the utilities. You know, really, it's run quite well. You could see page 9, the pictures of some of the units here, very well maintained, in good condition. Probably been updated fairly recently. Now, when you look further here, page 11, you could see I've just also applied that. Now, when you look at their income statement here, page 13, gross revenue, 2,043,424. We're at 2,242,000, so just slightly less. I know when you probably look it up, we're on the slightly higher end of net operating income. You could see here, they're at, for 2021, they were at 1,166,665. When we look at here, models at 1,193,520. Again, factoring in that this is a 6% cap rate, when I think we can all be reasonable that this is at minimum a half point higher than what the market would indicate for this type of property, that I think at 19,892,000, I think we're being totally reasonable. So on that end, I would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, any questions?
So I guess just to follow on with what you were stating there, you're suggesting that the model was incorrect in assigning a 6% cap rate.
I would say that in this instance, I think we can agree that it was.
Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Stephenson, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, and I don't either. Thank you. So, Mr. Smith, you can proceed with your evidence.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So 200 Belleville rather. This is the area I grew up in St. Patel. Belleville is not a high rental district. It is, there's a lot of low income housing in that particular on that particular street in the Lavely area in general. That's what that street typically is. Obviously there are variances within that, but that is the general profile of the area that we're looking at. Now, the subject property itself, built in 1971. I have no idea why that typo is there. It's not a 2006 property. Obviously not changed. My apologies for that. We're looking at 150 units. Pardon me, 48 of them one beds, 102 two-bedroom units. Now, we have some photos of both the exterior and the interior. There has been some renovation done previously. This is not brand new by any by any means. And they do have ongoing capital costs with this particular structure. Was the indication I was given by the ownership group that feeds into the return for the property. Now, the site is, well, let's look at the images of the units first of all a little bit. So fairly straightforward. Yes, there's been some renovation done in the past, not recently. If you look at the size of the kitchens, obviously it gives you an indication of overall size of the unit. They're not particularly large. They're in keeping with the area. They are intended to be somewhat more affordable. Site is shown on page number 9. Obviously, we have not a single building, but 3 buildings in total, and the location is shown on page number 10 in the St. Patel area. So just for orientation, on page number 10, if you head west from there, you come to Dakota Collegiate and the intersection of St. Mary's Road and Dunkirk / Dakota. If you travel eastward, you come to the Lavely School at the end of Belleville. So that is where the subject is located. Let's move into the property itself. I'll try and be concise here. Our revenue, total potential revenue, 100% occupancy is $2,219 at as of the valuation date, based on the actual rents charged, and this gives you an average rent of $1,115. This is in line with CMHC averages, essentially, and appropriate for the subject property. But more than that, this is what the property actually generates. So as of the valuation date, this is what you're getting, not a projection of what they might get by a model, etc. This is what you would receive if you were to purchase this property. Beyond that, obviously, there are we operate under rent control in Manitoba. So again, that increased arbitrary figure that the city has provided based on the modeling is not truly what you would receive if you purchase the property. So significantly different in this case with regard to the revenue stream. We've included the parking and laundry revenue as is appropriate in our valuation, as indicated on my page number 13. Vacancy, we're not disputing at 3.6%, and the expense allowance for the subject property is shown at the bottom of page 14, 3-year stabilization. Again, we have expenses running from 858 up to 893,000. Pardon me. And we have made the appropriate adjustments to arrive at the stabilized expenses of $897,232, which comes to 44.5% of effective gross income. And I will point out, this is about $70,000 lower than what the city has projected for the subject. So there is that detail there for you. We're not disputing the capitalization rate for the subject property. It is an older property in an area of lower revenue, affordable housing, etc. The model is put a 6% on it. Is it right? Well, I've indicated my questions with regard to how the model produces capitalization rates. But essentially, we need to treat the property on an equal basis as with others. I don't believe that the property, or rather the capitalization rate, is out of the range of the typical capitalization rates for standard market apartments in that time frame. Again, the rates that we see range from slightly below 5% up to above 6%, with 5 to 6% being typical. So 6% that's assigned to the subject is certainly within the parameters that could be applied to the subject. So this is summarized on my page number 19. The actual rent plus the revenue from laundry and parking, giving you your gross potential income, deducting vacancy and expenses, which again are 70,000 less than the city has projected, comes to an NOI of $1,119,029, capped at 6%. Gives you a final market value of $18,650,000. The addendum materials are simply the income and expense for the subject property. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Miklick, any questions?
Yeah, so just regarding, you had made statements about the area having its challenges. However, is there issues with vacancy in this apartment, or would it be running your typical around market vacancy?
It would be in line with market.
Okay. And other than that, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steffens, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, I have no questions either. And as this is the final matter we're dealing with on the docket today, I'll give both the assessor and Mr. Smith the opportunity of summing up if they wish to do so.
You know what? I don't need summation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I hope you feel better soon, Mr. Smith. And thank you both for your presentations and your presence. And you'll hear from us very shortly.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time, everyone. Thank you.
We now heard all items on the agenda today, and we're then closing this hearing. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.